Set 4 of Teamfight Tactics introduced several new units that have never been seen before in TFT, including fan favorites like Hecarim, Callista, and even Lee Sin. But it also introduced the 4th iteration of Yasuo, as well as the 4th for Vayne and Ashe, and a whole bunch that are still on their 3rd. You might think that the well is drying up, but there are still many champions who have yet to show up even once. So let's take a look at 5 potential units who I hope debut soon.
Okay.
Okay, hear me out. As quiet as he is, I think Rammus has the potential to be one of the most splashy units in the set. How I see it, Rammus's most defining abilities is Q, Powerball. To bring this experience to TFT, I think there's a few simple rules we should try and follow. First, we need to maximize the time spent traveling. The best Rammus rolls are when he runs you down from miles away. So let's have him target the furthest unit from him. Second, it's lame if he's interrupted immediately, which is actually quite likely if he's auto-attacking somebody. So to make sure he has some space when he ults, we should make sure that he starts the round with full mana. Finally, there needs to be some payoff for traveling the distance, so let's say that the damage and stun duration scale with how far he travels. I also think it would be cool if he didn't travel in a straight line and instead tried to swerve and Tokyo drift around everyone other than his target if possible, but who knows how difficult that would be to implement. Now this is already a pretty cool kit, but I want it to be even flashier, because I think if we were to add in Rammus, the obvious trade for him is a ninja. He has the ninja skin, and ninja is missing a cool 5-cost payoff. So to make Rammus cool enough to fill that vacancy, I thought about adding in his taunt, but ninjas already have Shen basically doing the same thing, so let's go a different direction and use Rammus's Earthquake. So for 5 gold, Ninja Rammus will sneakily roll through the battlefield, stun an enemy, and then provide AoE damage to the backline. Oh, and he's also Vanguard, because he's Rammus.
Are you afraid?
I think of everybody on this list, I'm most surprised about Fiddlesticks. Every one of his abilities is super cool and impactful and could make a good TFT ability. If I had to guess, I think he's been excluded because of his aesthetic, and that they're probably saving him for when they do a Wizard of Oz set. To me, Fiddle's W is his coolest ability, but we probably want to refine it a bit. Fiddlesticks draining 7 clumped up keepers at once is probably a bit too ridiculous, or the damage would have to be minuscule if he's doing 1 at a time. So what I propose is we model it a bit like his original W, as a single target damage spell. I see this Fiddlesticks as either a 2 or 3 cost, and basically a toned down Urgot. When he casts his ability, he will start draining a target, and won't stop until he's interrupted or the target dies. But it's not going to be a 2-second clock like Urgot. It could take a while into tankier units. It could go on the whole round. This version of Fiddles would excel in the 1v1, as he's applying constant damage and healing, but would be weak to interruptions and being teamed up on. Although Fiddlesticks does have a pirate skin, I think we should stick with the base splash. I see him fitting well with Dusk. He would benefit from the extra AP, and he's a pretty spooky guy. And then also, I think he could fit the role of a cultist. He sort of looks like a voodoo doll or a cult effigy.
Happy hour incoming!
Gragas, like Fiddlesticks, is a unit with great abilities that just hasn't really fit any of the vibes Riot has been going for. I mean, Gragas in space would have been quite the juxtaposition. I had a lot of ideas for Gragas. I think a cool 1-cost version of him would just be using his Drunken Rage to give him a buff on his next auto attack every so often, sort of like current Wukong. And his regular barrel would also translate great as a 2 or 3 cost unit ability. But I think Gragas has the potential to be the Cho'Gath or Sejuani fill-in for a given set with his explosive cast. It would be a bit worse crowd control as it's knocking back enemies instead of stunning, but we'll add on that it makes sure the enemies lose aggro on their target. So we'll say that Gragas targets the closest enemy to the allied unit with the least health, and throws the barrel in between them closer to the enemy. The idea is that he's creating a buffer between your unit who was about to die and the enemy who was about to kill them. Obviously, Gragas is a brawler. I think he fits that term better than any brawler we've had before, but I'm going to do a bit of a throwback for his second trait and use Ocean. First, he has a cool diving skin, but he could also turn into a payoff for that comp and fill more of a carry role if he's able to cast a lot of times. He'd probably have to take Nami's spot, but you know what? I'm okay with that, and I think most people would be too.
Time to introduce myself.
It's sometimes easy to forget about Zac, but he's really a remarkable champion. His jump covers so much ground it feels like it should be his ultimate, so obviously that's what we're going to use for him. He would be playing a role sort of like Blitzcrank, but instead of bringing the farthest enemy to him, he would bring the party to them. Honestly, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here. Should just have a normal mana cost that is close to full at the start of the fight, and soon he would jump to the farthest unit away from him and knock them up in adjacent units when he lands. If the fight goes on long enough, he might jump back. I think Zac also works as a brawler. It's always fun to see a giant Zac because of how much health he has. And once again, going back to set 2, I think he totally fits the poison vibe. His color is a perfect match, and it adds a little bit of pizzazz to his kit if he's making the enemy he hits need to spend more mana on their next spell.
Not Troll Chief, Troll King!
Finally, we have Trundle, and unlike a lot of the previous units I talked about, I totally get why he hasn't shown up yet. I mean, let's go through his abilities. First, he can make a big ice pillar that slows people, which doesn't really translate into TFT. Generated terrain and movement speed slows have been used very sparingly, and this doesn't sound like an especially cool way to do it. His W is a massive circle that increases his healing and attack speed, but it's just so visually noisy for an effect that really wouldn't do much. It would be like if every time Fiora parried, there was a shockwave the size of a Morgana pool. His ultimate Subjugate actually has the opposite problem. It's a very impactful ability that is visually difficult to follow. So what is he left with? Chomp. Yeah, Chomp isn't very exciting, and it's honestly pretty similar to how they've done Zed for the last 2 sets with stealing attack damage. But as a basic idea, it works, especially if we make him a 1-cost unit. So we'll say on a low mana cost, Trundle's next attack is a Chomp that deals bonus damage. To spice it up, I added a bit of personality from Trundle's passive, so that if he kills a unit on a Chomp, he'll heal off it. That should hopefully make him stand out a little bit. And for traits, I think Trundle would have fit best in Season 1. He obviously fits as a Glacial, but I think Wild would be a good secondary for him. The best part of Trundle is watching him whack people with a club as fast as he can, and Wild stacking attack speed works great for that. Alright, there's my top 5. Let me know if I missed your favorites in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, check out my channel to see a deep dive on every unit in set 4. I've done about 20 so far, and I'm aiming to continue doing one a week. Next up is Kennen. I had a bit of trouble getting footage for him, so that's why we did a top 5 instead. If you've already subscribed, thanks for sticking with me through this. And if you haven't, you can come fight me IRL. I'll introduce the top 5 knuckles on my fist to your face.